in this lesson, we'll come full circle and have a better understanding of how JSX helps us solve the problems we experienced in the previous lesson. So once again, I've opened up babbljs.io. We've been on this site before when we were exploring the basics of JSX. And as a reminder, here in the settings panel, you can check React. And when you do that, you can write valid React code, i.e. JSX, in this left-hand panel. Now what's going to happen here is whenever I write valid JSX, we're going to see the transpiled code on the right-hand side. Previously in the course, we ignored what was going on here, but now I'd like us to pay attention because it's going to be pretty awesome, pretty revealing. So right here, let me hide this thing. And what I'm going to do is paste the JSX or HTML representation of the code that we've been working on in the previous lessons. We have an unordered list with a class, and then inside it, we have two list items with their own classes and their own text. So here's what that looks like. Here is our unordered list with a class of red list, and here we have two list items with sushi and steak. Take a look at what the resulting code is on the right-hand side. It is the exact same code that we wrote manually using create element method calls in the previous lessons. So once again, what we have on the left is not HTML. It just looks like HTML. It is JSX. But behind the scenes, the transpiler here, or the Babel, in other words, understands how to transform this syntax into basic React create element method calls. So for example, what do we begin with here? We begin with React create element passing in a string of UL because our top level or our most top level element is going to be an unordered list. The second argument is that object of props / attributes. Here we have class name. And our third argument, of course, is the children. And in here, it's using the sequential argument approach. So what we have is two sequential calls of create element in line. The first one is a new li with this props object and a string of sushi representing the child text of the first list item. And then we have another create element call. That's the exact same thing, a list item with these props / attributes, and then the child content of steak. So we wrote this the exact same way in VS Code. The only difference is we created these things first and assigned them to constants, but the same idea still applies. It's still fundamentally the exact same code as we wrote. Now the important thing to consider here is on the left-hand side, our JSX is 4 lines long, and on the right-hand side, the resulting JavaScript is 23 lines. And that's starting to reveal to us why JSX is so beneficial and helpful. It helps us hide away or run away or abstract away from the problem of manually having to write all this code ourselves. That's why JSX was invented. You don't need to use it, but 99% of React code bases will, because it's a much more efficient and enjoyable way to write code that eventually ends up like this, right? So once again, it's not HTML, it's JSX that transpiles to JavaScript code that then registers that with the virtual DOM that then manually updates the real life DOM. But from our perspective, it's equivalent to HTML code. It looks completely like regular HTML code. It basically functions in just about the same way, but it gives us the additional benefit of writing all this code in the React ecosystem. And obviously, even with this is somewhat manageable, but imagine a much more complex example. Let's say, for example, that we have a main tag right here, and right here I'm gonna indent this and close this main tag right here, and maybe we have our unordered list wrapped in a section element. So once again, I'm gonna add a section, indent this, add section. This code is a lot more difficult to write in vanilla React create element method calls than it is with just a basic JSX chunk like this. Now we have 8 lines of JSX, and that evaluates to 31 lines of vanilla JavaScript, right? And imagine on a real world web page, you might have literally thousands of lines of JSX. It's completely laborious and frankly impossible to write all that code as a developer using create element calls. You could, but nobody would want to do it, right? So hopefully the kind of full story or the full circle of this section kind of becomes complete in that I hope you understand why JSX was invented and the problem it helps you solve. We started kind of at a very low level of understanding the browser's DOM API. We understood that the React create element method is kind of a more lightweight version of that. It creates this lightweight React element, which functions very similarly to a DOM node in the browser, except it lives in the virtual DOM. And finally, we saw how that approach, while beneficial and living within React, that approach was very verbose and required a lot of writing and a lot of complexity and nesting. And it's much easier for a computer to generate this code automatically, which is exactly what a transpiler does from JSX. And that's why the React team invented JSX, to make this process feel as intuitive and as simple and as clean as writing HTML, right? But it really isn't under the hood. It just gives us the illusion of being HTML. All right, so hopefully that all makes sense, and I will see you in the next lesson.